Hey there guys, two things real quick before the video starts. First thing, I'll be attending DragonCon in Atlanta, Georgia this Labor Day weekend every day with Maxbox. Details are on screen. If you're going, I'd love to meet up and say hi. Second, this video is sponsored by Amino. If you haven't heard of Amino from other content creators yet, it's a really neat place that has tons of sub-communities that center towards different fandoms, TV shows, comics, games, you name it. And of course, there is one for our beloved TF2 that is built by and dedicated towards TF2 fans like you. You can partake in public chat rooms with other TF2 fans, browse the featured page for the best posts made, and my personal favorite, random quizzes. Gotta keep up that useless knowledge fresh in your mind like myself. Anyhow guys, all the links you need for it are down in the description below, and if you're interested, you should totally go check it out. If you're not interested, you should still check it out. Anyhow, on with the actual video. TF2 has an insanely rich and literally insane lore that's been developed for years. With it comes of course characters that have fallen through the cracks in time, whether that be because they've only appeared once in a hidden image, or they just simply have only appeared in the comics. These are some of TF2's obscure characters. If you haven't seen the first video on obscure characters and you're interested, I suggest you do by clicking the little card in the corner. It tackles a whole different lot of characters, and I even go over my personal favorite obscure character in it. But let's not dilly-dally, let's begin this train ride. To begin, we start with a character that has a connection to Jack, who was discussed in the last video, Old Nick. Long story short, Old Nick is the TF2's universe's Santa Claus, who hails from Australia. Now, short story long, on December 18th, 1788, Nicholas Crowder was sailing to Australia, but after seeing the hot mess of a landscape that Australia was, he changed his course to the South Pole with intentions of conquering it. The legend goes that he's still alive to this day. Now, every December 18th, Nicholas, now known as Old Nick, returns to Australia to determine if kids have been naughty or nice. Unlike our jolly old Saint Nick, this Old Nick gives not a gift of a toy train to Jack, but the children in this universe get the great honor of being abducted and taken back to the South Pole to work as free child labor in Nick's workshop. On the other hand, the naughty children are forced to make hats and weapons for Nick, which are then delivered to his mansion on December 17th. Any duplicates he receives during the time he sells online. Yeah, the TF2 team just needed some ridiculous excuse to go along with the first Smithmas Manco sale. Old Nick only really appeared once in the comic A Smithmas Story, which was a tie-in for the Australian Christmas update in 2010. During the events of the comic, Old Nick storms into the shopping mall where, unfortunately for him, the mercs are doing their mandatory community service. After getting pounded on by Scout and Soldier, he picks up little Jack to abduct back home to his icy wasteland, before getting killed with a frozen piece of pointy ice. While Old Nick certainly isn't the most obscure character, seeing as how he's not only had a fan-made model of him made, but he also has quite a few cosmetics that are linked to him. The first one is the Prancer's Pride, an obvious reference to the Grinch. It's shown that one of his reindeer is wearing it in nod to the single antler that Max wears on his head in the Grinch. The two others are often forgotten cosmetics that either nobody has ever heard of or they just straight up have forgotten about because they were only obtainable during the Steam holiday sale of 2013. Randolph the Blood-Nosed Caribou and the Smithmas Caribou were only obtainable by crafting the badge for that specific sale, which, needless to say, isn't able to be done anymore. Because of this, the two hats which were inspired by Old Nick's own hat and his reindeer have been thrown into obscurity. Even though the caribou is pretty dang expensive, it at least has some listings. Randolph doesn't. And supposedly, there were only two to have ever existed. Because of that, a market listing on backback.tf, one that doesn't exist, but if you manage to find the one listing that ever went up, you'll notice that it was really freaking expensive and cost more than a golden pan does today. Thanks for that, inflation. Next up, we have the Soldier's old war buddies. These three men went camping with Soldier in Dr. Gordbort's Victory Pack comic, where Soldier fondly recounts their time together in the war. Except all three men are just wooden cutouts. Yeah, these three guys don't exist and are just a figment of Soldier's wild and crazy imagination. Alright, even though those three weren't actually real, these next few were. Sorta, kinda. Their achievements were probably also made up by Soldier, but lightning round, go! First up, we have the first president of the United States, George Washington. He also invented America, but historians agree that his greatest failure was his inability to permanently be invisible. He was using the Sniper vs. Spy update to promote the Cloak and Dagger, and then later on in A Cold Day in Hell as a soldier hallucination along with the next character. Infamous for defecting to the British during the Revolutionary War, Benedict Arnold's greatest crime was not eating soup. He appeared alongside Soldier's Washington hallucination and was later mentioned in a blog post promoting Pymation's Meet the Amazing series, where it was stated that his last words were, "My only regret is I didn't watch enough cartoons." Last up in the lightning round, we have Aleister Crowley. Crowley was an English oculist who was responsible for cursing Skull Island during a speedboat cursing tour. That's about all we have on him. There's not much else. Man, after all that, that's only a handful of historical characters. There's even more, but I'll save those for a later date. Right now, let's finish this off with the Hale lineage. While Saxon Hale is in no way an obscure character, and by that I mean he has a freaking game mode named and made around him, the rest of the family may be to a lot of people. To start off, we have Barnabas Hale, a 19th century frontiersman who was employed as an aide and tracker by Zephaniah Mann. You know, the guy who we briefly mentioned last time that ends up becoming the ghost that spookifies people? Yeah, that guy. Anyhow, Barnabas inherited Manco from Zephaniah after he died. Hence the reasoning why the man in charge doesn't share the same name with the company he's in charge of. Barnabas first appeared in this Mann family portrait, which was a hidden image on the first Scream Fortress's update page. Here, he's simply seen at the bedside of a sick Zephaniah Mann. His last two appearances were in the comic Blood Brothers, as well as the Ketchup comic. In Blood Brothers, he's shown during a flashback to when the Mann brothers were all born. He says but one word, and then is the only one who cries over the death of Betty, Zephaniah's wife. In the Ketchup comic, he's basically there for, well, to catch the reader up on the current important parts of TF2's insane lore. Other than that, Barnabas just kinda really hasn't been mentioned, so let's move on to the next Hale. The last Hale we'll be covering is Bilious Hale, the father to Saxon Hale. Just like his father, Barnabas, he inherited Manco and ran it during the early 1900s. Bilious is known for escaping a fatal mineshaft collapse by simply punching his way out of it. 14 workers may have died from it, but the proud Australian survived. His second and probably most important achievement, if you could even call it that, was shutting down the coal mine and coal-powered munitions factory 50 years after it was founded. This place, which was also where the mineshaft collapse was, eventually became a place where our current mercenaries would be fighting away Greyman's robot army. That place became Coal Town. In addition to his coal-tacular achievements, Bilious was also one of 5 people who owned a telephone in the US, with the other 4 being Plutarch, Redmond, the President, Alexander Graham Bell, and what's thought to be the administrator's predecessor. But the administrator line of probably relatives is another story for another day. As always, if you enjoyed this video, tell me in the comments below. And if you didn't comment it last time, what's your favorite TF2 obscure characters? And if you've got any characters you'd like me to go over, please tell me below. However, as a disclaimer, there are certain characters I will not be going over, and the reason is because I do not deem them obscure enough to be in this series. So, characters like Saxon Hale and Marasmus are not going to be covered because they are pretty well known on their own. Maybe one day I'll do a whole video dedicated to them, but as is, most people know who those guys are. But if you got any other random, super tiny, literally nobody knows about characters, please tell me below and I'll look into them. Now I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next